As Austin mentioned, we are launching today an 8-week sermon series across all of our services on heaven. We're going to be looking at the afterlife. So not just heaven, but the new heavens, the new earth. We're going to talk about hell one week. We are going to all the places that we as preachers are scared to go. So we're thankful that you're here with us. If you are kind of a double dipper and you come on Thursdays and Sundays, that's okay. You're going to be so knowledgeable about heaven by the end of this that you can tell all your friends what we learned. They're going to be similar sermons, they're going to be similar topics, but they're going to be very different sermons in terms of the scriptures we choose and the illustrations we use and all that. So don't feel like you have to pick one or the other. Also, each Sunday after the sermon, Jerry and I are going to be filming a postscript. So we're going to be talking about the curriculum for the week. We're going to be talking about our sermons for the week, what was difficult to preach on, what was easy to preach on, kind of some stuff that missed the cut because we try, believe this or not, we try to keep the sermons short. But you can check that out. That'll be on our, don't clap for that. That'll be on our YouTube page. And as Austin mentioned, the best way to really consume all of this content is to be a part of a small group. It is not too late. Next week is too late. So if you've been putting it off, tonight is the night. There's that blue card there. We still have room. Alex and I are hosting a small group on Monday nights. We still have room. We would love to have you. There is a small group for your demographic and for the time of the week that fits you best. So sign up for a small group. That's my last pitch. And as we've been talking about this study and these 8 weeks on heaven, I've been hearing the same question that I think a lot of our staff has been hearing, and I think it's a very good question. It's really a twofold question. One, why on earth are we studying heaven for 8 weeks? And two, how can you fill 8 weeks of stuff about heaven? Very good questions. I'm going to answer the first one. Why are we going to talk about heaven? When I was thinking about this question, and as Jerry was reflecting on the fact that he has preached like twice on heaven in his, 49 years or whatever of preaching. See, I make jokes on him to see if he actually watches my sermons or not. But we don't talk about it. And so we don't talk about it. We don't think about it. We don't get ready for it. I think of heaven a lot like I think about vacations. So I know fall is now here. It doesn't feel like it outside, but football is here. Fall semester has started. We're all back from vacations. I hope you took some vacations. The Beaumonts were gone for like 6 months. They called it a vacation. It seems like cheating to me. But we're all back. So Alex and I took a couple of vacations. I took a couple of vacations. She was on one of them. We went to Florida with our family, and then I went out to North Carolina with some buddies. And as I think about vacation, it's a lot like heaven because when it comes to vacation, there's really two types of people. There's organizers, and there's improvisers. So organizers, I'm an organizer. I'm generally pretty bad at vacation. I've told you before that I live and die based off of my calendar and my to-do list, and so I try to pack everything in. I try to be really, really efficient and get it all done. So as an organizer, before a vacation, I start to plan. Well, what time are we going to get there? Well, where are we going to stay? Where are we going to eat? What monuments are we going to go see? What beaches are we going to go to? And what are we going to do when we're at the beach? And then who do we have to make sure? What do we have to make sure we do? And then what time do we need to leave? And what time do we need to leave for the airport? Organizers are always way too early to the airport. Hand up on that. And then you know when you're going to get back, how long it's going to take you to unpack. Who are my organizers here? All right, that's about half. Now go ahead and lower your hand and check your watch while you're doing it because you want to know what time it is. I get you. I feel you. Then there's the improvisers. These are the people who just kind of roll up like, I guess we're here. I'm probably going to take a nap. I don't know when I'm going to wake up. If I do wake up, I might go to the beach, might meet some people, might not, if we run out of time, we'll grab McDonald's. Doesn't really matter. I'm just here on vacation. These people are better at vacation, but they freak me out. Who are my improvisers? Okay, so that's about half and half. So when it comes to heaven, I would venture to say that the vast majority of us are improvisers. There's some people who are organized, who have really studied the scriptures, and who have read the books, and who know what heaven is going to look like, and they're so excited about it. But most of us kind of are just like, I know it's there. I know it's going to happen. I'm pretty excited for it, but I don't really know what it's going to be like. And so if that's the camp you're in, when it comes to heaven, that's been the camp that I'm in. What I want to challenge you, and I want to help you shift some perspective tonight, because heaven, when we learn about it, when we study it, when we look at God's word and what it says about heaven, it's not just about what happens when you die. That's a big part of it, don't get me wrong there, but it's about much more. Because when we learn about heaven, when we study the scriptures, when we see what God is preparing for us in the afterlife, we learn how to make this life matter for that life. This life changes because of what we know about that life. So as we talk through heaven, we're not just going to be talking about what's going to happen when you die, but it's going to be about how you can live in light of what's going to happen when you die. And so that's the main purpose for why we are studying heaven. There is enough curriculum for 8 weeks. I promise we could probably do a whole semester on it, but you would get bored and stop coming. But that perspective shift is important. Now, I want to help you shift perspective tonight. To not just think about heaven as some place that we're going to go one day, some place that is like a vacation. But what I want to show you tonight is I want to kind of whet your whistle for heaven tonight. And I want to show you that heaven isn't just a place where you're going to go one day. It's not just a vacation, but heaven is your home. And we're all homesick for it. One of my favorite passages in the New Testament, I've read it here plenty of times before, is from Philippians 3. And Paul says that our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul's shifting our perspective here. Because I think so many of us think that earth is what matters. And we think, I've got these 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then I'm going to go off somewhere else. I'm going to take that vacation to heaven. But really, when Paul says that we're citizens of heaven, he shifts that around. He says, no, heaven is your home, and earth is your vacation. And I think that really fundamentally changes the way we think about our time here. It's living in light of eternity instead of living now and hoping that something great happens later on. Because listen, the reality is, and I've told you this before, and if this is news to you, then I don't know where you've been, but you're going to die. Welcome to Lakeway. You're going to die. Right? So yesterday was my birthday. I turned 28 years old. I am now old. But Alex and I disagree on this. I am now firmly in my mid to upper 20s. She says that 28 is upper 20s. I like to keep that mid in there, that mid to upper 20s. But have you noticed that kind of every birthday after 21 is just depressing? Like, it just is, right? It's exciting until 21's an arbitrary number there, folks. You hit 25 and you're like, okay, great, I get a discount on rental cars. That's kind of nice. But other than that, every other one is you're just like, I'm one step closer to the grave. I don't know what that was. So like I woke up this morning. I woke up at 5:29 without the aid of my alarm. My back kind of hurt a little bit. My knees are sore. I'm seeing wrinkles in places that I haven't before. I'm starting to think that like Lincoln Town cars don't look that bad. I get this strange craving for Lubies at 4:30 every afternoon. It's just a reminder, right, that all of us are getting older. You may be a bit older than me, but we're all getting older. Every second we're getting older. And every second is a reminder that we are mortal. That these bodies that are minds, that this tent that we walk in is not meant to be eternal. It's just here for a little while. And so what I want to help you to shift your perspective in is to not be afraid of death. Right? If you could think of what the biggest thing, the worst thing that could happen, the scariest thing that could happen to you, the studies will say it's number one is public speaking, but a close second is death. That's true. We shouldn't be scared of death. And the reason for that is that heaven is our home, so that when we die and when we go to heaven, it's a homecoming. And I know that phrase, particularly around this time of year, homecoming, packs a lot of meaning in Central Texas. So this is not one of those like the awkward little boy gets the big sign and has to do all these magical things now to invite the girl to homecoming, and then they go and there's the obnoxious mums and the garters and parents spend way too much money on it. Not that kind of homecoming. But the homecoming of heaven is complete joy. It's complete happiness. It's complete completeness. It's everything that your soul is aching for. And so, because that's what heaven is, we can be excited. It seems weird to say that I'm excited for death, but it's going to be awesome. And so that's a perspective that I want to help you shift here over these next 8 weeks. And that perspective has to deal with the aches that we have as well. Because if heaven is our home, if that's what we were made for, if that's where we're going, that's really where we came from, then all the achings that we have point us to heaven. Right? Because think about this. Think about the mass shootings that we see. We see that and we say, I want to fix that, and I can't help but wait. I can't wait until all of that is done. That's a longing for heaven. We experience death. We experience grief of people that we love, and we say, I just hate this feeling. I want it to go away. That's a longing for something eternal called heaven. We see natural disasters. We see rainforest burning. We see Dorian bearing down its weight on the Bahamas and on Florida and on the East Coast, and we think something isn't right here. That points us to the fact that there is something right beyond. And so to help us shift this perspective and see that heaven is a homecoming and why we ache when we see evil and destruction in the world, we're going to look at Ecclesiastes 3. It's funny, we really only read Ecclesiastes at funerals, which it's one of my favorite books of the Old Testament, but I'll be honest, if you're going to read through it, it's really depressing. So Ecclesiastes historically is written by King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. And Ecclesiastes is really all about perspective. He begins to search the world, to look at what people do, to see what people gain value from. And over again, the refrain in the book of Ecclesiastes is, it's vanity. Nothing matters. It's a perspective switch to say the things of this world really don't matter. What does matter is eternal. And so in Ecclesiastes 3, you'll see there if you've got your Bibles open, the first few verses are the famous passage of Ecclesiastes. There's a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time for everything. And then the teacher goes on in verse 9 to say this: what gain has the worker from his toil? What good can come from working? He says, I've seen the business that God has given to these children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. And also, he has put eternity into every person's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So as I was studying this passage, I really like the part, he's put eternity into our hearts. And that's where I really want to camp out for a little bit. But there's that second phrase in there that seems a little bit strange. It says he's put eternity into our heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So there's kind of two tensions going on here. On the one hand, the teacher says we have eternity in our heart. But then on the other hand, there's this temporal stuff, the beginning to end in time. And we can't understand that in our head. And to me, what that points us towards is a reminder that even though we have something God-like in us, eternity planted in us, we can't understand the fullness of God. God's glory and his riches are unsearchable, so big that our human brains, our small human brains, can't comprehend them. That's important because we all have that eternity in our heart. We all have an eternity-shaped hole in our heart. We long for something eternal. We long for something perfect. But what do? We think sometimes that we're God. And so we can start filling that hole with things. We can say, I know I want more. But we try to fill that eternal void with something temporal. There was a while ago, I was speaking with a young man who was a drug addict. And I phrased that sentence intentionally. Originally, I spoke with a man who was a drug addict, but I realized that our addictions don't define us. I feel like somebody just needs to hear that today. Your addictions don't define you. And so this young man who was addicted to drugs just needed someone to talk to. And so I talked with him. We sat for a couple of hours, and it was interesting because I got to look not just into his mind, but I think the mind of all of us. And so as he was explaining to me the difficulties that he had faced in his life, the relationships that had broken, the jobs that had been lost, the money that had been lost, the destruction, the havoc that he wreaked on his family, he began kind of interspersed all throughout his story to begin a similar sentence with, "All I need is." So at first he said, well, all I need is a better paying job. Well, all I need is some money. Well, all I really need is a girl that I can take home tonight. Well, all I need is to get off drugs and to give up this life. Well, all I need is some more drugs to make it all go away. And as I think about that, I think that's the raw honesty of the human soul. That we think, all I need is something more. All I need is that right job. All I need is that next paycheck. All I need is to meet that right person. All I need is for my kids to obey. All I need is to finally have that time to retire. We say, all that I need, all that I need, all that I need. But as soon as we get to the period at the end of that sentence, there's another all I need. We're never satisfied. We always have that aching inside of us when we try to fill an eternal hole with something that is temporal, because all the things of this earth are going to have a ceiling. Right? Think about it. What do we seek? What do we desire? Some people desire beauty. And so you buy the right makeup, you spend money you don't have on clothes, you go to the gym, you try to become beautiful, but beautiful is going to stop. Or we say money, I just need to get that money. I need to get that toy. I need to get that car. I need to get that nice house on the right side of town. But it's never enough. We try and we try to fill this ache inside of our souls for heaven. We try to fill it with earthly things. And in the words of the writer of Ecclesiastes, all that is vanity. I've quoted this passage according to C.S. Lewis. This quote from C.S. Lewis 1,000 times in here if I've quoted it once. He says that if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. And we all have that desire. We can all look around at our situation, at what's going on in the madness of the world and say there's something wrong here and I can't fix it. That points us to the fact that there's something more, there's something eternal, there's something waiting on the other side. And what's fascinating is that even people, and you may be here tonight, you wouldn't identify yourself as a Christ follower. We're glad you're here. Even people with that same bent still believe in an afterlife. I read one study that said that almost a third of self-proclaimed atheists and agnostics and people with no religious affiliation still say they believe in an afterlife. The studies will show that as the nones are increasing, that's N-O-N-E-S, the people with no religious affiliation, at the same time, in almost the same proportion, Americans' belief in the afterlife is also on the up. Studies will say that as scientists and neurologists study the brain more and more, they're realizing that there's more than just kind of blood and guts up in there, that there's some sort of level of consciousness that is eternal. I read a blog this week, and if you're following along in the YouVersion notes there, this quote's in here. It's really a tragic blog. It's by a young man who grew up in church and then later on in life rejected his faith. And in this blog, it's entitled, Atheist Confession, I Wish There Was a Heaven. And he says this. He says, I miss heaven. I don't miss God, and I don't think I want to be there forever. I certainly don't miss the concept of hell. But I wish there was a place where I could understand everything, where everyone loved each other deeply, where we had that deep, rich happiness that feels like mom's sweet potato pie on Thanksgiving. everyone peaceful, everyone loving each other, everything beautiful. I fight for that today. I know utopia doesn't exist, he says, that no matter how hard I try, most people won't see the person I think is the real me. On some level, I will have to live and die alone. I miss the concept of being completely and thoroughly and deeply loved by someone who knows me inside out. I miss being able to be honest about missing the things that without fearing that my atheist card would be taken away. Heaven is a dream that I've had on my mind for most of my life. It's tragic, isn't it? Because this young man properly identifies that need that we all have to be completely loved, to have everything beautiful, to have someone know us fully and still love us fully in our truest of selves. But he concludes that it still can't exist. But listen, here's what I know. I know that every desire that we have, and this young man says he desires heaven. Every desire we have comes from somewhere. Right, think about it. Think about the things that you desire. I desire a bigger truck. Why? Because I have friends with bigger trucks. Right? I desire to be a better preacher. Why? Because there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of better preachers than me. And I see that and say, I want that. Most of our desires and our wishes come from knowing that something else exists and then wanting to take it for ourselves. If that's the case, then how could we want and how can we desire a place like heaven if it doesn't exist? He says utopia doesn't exist, but he can describe it perfectly in the same language that the biblical authors would use. He desires something that is real and that is heaven, even if he doesn't realize it. And so I mentioned this at the start, that heaven and thinking about these concepts and shifting our perspective to realize that the aches we have on earth are for something eternal isn't just about what happens when we die. Because I think a lot of us, and myself included for most of my life, we take a really myopic view of heaven. We think that heaven is about a moment in time that we experience, and then we try to get other people to experience that as well, right? We think heaven is about that night when you were 14 at church camp. The lights were low. The music band was playing just the right song. There was a little glimmer in your camp girlfriend's eye. Right? The youth pastor was funny at the right times and then serious at the right times. And then at the end of the song, when everybody had their hands up in the air, you walked forward and you promised to God forever that you would give your heart to him and serve him and break all of your rock and roll CDs and sit next to the kid alone at the lunch table, and you would tell all your friends about that experience you have and that now you're going to heaven, and you would want everyone else to experience that as well. We think that that's all that heaven is about. And then you have that experience, and then you go home and you still listen to your rock and roll CDs and you sit with your cool kids at your cool table and nothing changes, but that's not what heaven is about. I like to think about it like this. I mentioned earlier vacations. Because I am an organizer on vacation, I'm also a nester in hotel rooms. You know what I'm talking about? I get to a hotel room, and the first thing I do is I unpack. Right, I use the drawers, I hang stuff up, I iron my clothes, I have little pictures I put up. Don't laugh at me, I'm weird, okay? My wife just said, I hate that so much. You need to sit back there. I can hear you way too much. But I do that because the place that I'm at, I want that place to look a little more like home. I know I'm not going to be there forever. Sometimes I'm only there for a night, but I want that to look a little bit more like home. If heaven is our home and earth is our vacation, then friends, it is our job, it is our duty to make this earth look a little bit more like heaven. That's what Jesus tells us to pray in the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so that's up to us. To not just shift our perspective to say heaven is our home, but because this is not our home, we need to make it look just a little bit more like home. It's what Paul says in Colossians 3. He says, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not things that are earth, and then do something about it. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, give money to the poor. The reason we do that as Christians is not because we want God to love us more, because we have to earn his favor. We do it because we believe that he's preparing a place for us that is perfect, and we want this place to look a little bit more perfect down here, knowing that it never will. But doing everything we can in our little purview, in our little circle, to make it just look a little bit more like the place that he is preparing for us. So I know in this room, we have a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that we brought in. We have health issues, we have job issues, we have kid issues, we have relationship issues, we have personal issues. If you didn't bring stuff here tonight, you can go ahead and walk out. We've all got it. My challenge for you tonight is know that you can't fix your stuff with another dollar, with another guy, with another girl, with another follower, with another drink, with another pill. You have an eternity-sized hole inside of you that only Jesus Christ can fill. And when he fills it, when he comes in, when he shifts your perspective to say, I'm calling you home, then we're called to go and make this place, though it's temporary, look a little bit more like home and be homesick for heaven. Pray with me.